So there are a couple of major trends in proliferation. First of all, there are the aggregate numbers. When we look at the aggregated numbers, they tend to show a fall in the number of operationally deployed weapons. But when we dig a little deeper, the majority of this comes from US and Russian arms control. When we dig deeper, we see actors like India, Pakistan and North Korea increasing their inventories. So there's a slight mismatch between the overall numbers and what's going on internally. Second of all, we're seeing a greater movement towards survivability. This is where countries modernise their weapons capability so they're more survivable in the context of a nuclear attack. So we're seeing more mobile systems, we're seeing some silo-based ones being modernised, and we're seeing submarine-launched weapons being developed. So driving global trends, there are a number of factors. Most importantly, there's the increased interest in ballistic missile defences. So we're seeing modernisation efforts to get around ballistic missile defences. A second factor driving this could be the growth in precision conventional munitions. So while a lot of countries feel that nuclear weapons should be used first in order for them to retaliate, the growth in conventional strike capabilities mean that a country might actually have to endure a lot of conventional damage before it can resort to a nuclear option. So what we're seeing is a potential movement away from no first use policies or that sense of stability, and that's being driven by conventional factors as well as other countries' nuclear programs. So the implications of the changing trends really depends on the countries we're looking at, but in general we're seeing the movement away from the two-actor model as we see in the Cold War and the rise of nuclear weapon states which are not members of a nuclear proliferation treaty. So with this we're seeing new concepts. Smaller countries with smaller arsenals and lesser capabilities are coming onto the scene which we don't fully understand. So if I take an example of the India-Pakistan dynamic, we're seeing a small country like Pakistan against a much larger neighbour with a much larger conventional force. We're seeing Pakistan elevate its nuclear weapons in its force posture, really to signal to India that it's not prepared to accept unacceptable losses. What this means for its nuclear force is that it's prepared and is developing, it's prepared to use tactical weapons. And this really signals to India that it's prepared to use larger weapons and solve what is known as the credibility problem. What this means, though, is that Pakistani movements always have an air of nuclear weapons behind them, and so there's a much greater risk of miscalculation. So another example might be the Chinese DF-5B. So the DF-5 is a silo-based weapon. It's a heavy rocket which is capable of reaching the United States, and what we've seen is in the September 2015 parade is the introduction of a MIRV warhead. So that's a multiple independently retargetable re-entry vehicle. What this does, it allows China to navigate the re-entry vehicles so they can defeat US ballistic missile defense systems. The upshot of this is that it maintains China's credibility and the credibility of its nuclear deterrent, but what it also allows is China to move away from its traditional standing. Now, China has always maintained a small stockpile of nuclear weapons, and it agrees to a posture of minimum deterrence and no first use. But the technological innovations being driven by ballistic missile defense could allow China, if it chose to strike US nuclear forces. And this would change its posture from a counter value, where it strikes cities, to a counter force where it could strike US nuclear weapons. And it reduces stability because it allows the incentive to knock out a large portion of the US deterrent. So changes to a threat profile really need to be understood in terms of capability and intent. Innovation is driving a change in capability, but it's really important that we understand the intent behind these changes as well.